I am under the influence, but I did not drive. Swear to God.
But you were driving.
I was not.
Sophia, you were driving. You had the car.
Not.
Do you remember that you had the car in drive and then I had to put it in park for you?
I was not.
Late one night in November 2024, a police officer in Sarasota, Florida, pulled over a Hooters waitress on suspicion of driving under the influence. 22-year-old Sophia Ross tried to flirt her way out of trouble, but her smooth talking didn't get her very far. She could be heard asking the cop if they were going to make out and calling him Daddy in body cam footage of the interaction.
We're gonna make out here.
Okay.
We're gonna make out here.
No, we're not. Here, wait, stop right there.
Turn off the lights. We're gonna make out.
Wait, stay right there.
Oh,
okay.
My bad.
Ross even said she'd do anything for the officer.
Okay, do you want to try this first exercise for me?
I will do anything for you, Daddy.
But she reportedly refused to finish a field sobriety test. At .318, her blood alcohol content was nearly 4 times the legal limit, and she was charged with DUI with a blood alcohol content greater than .15. Records show that Ross is currently free on bail amid the ongoing case. Number 17. Ellie Masukevich.
I'm sorry, hello?
I'm Officer Costa with Crystal Lake Police Department. We're just talking to you because we got a couple complaints that you might have been swerving on the road or...
We need you to step out, okay? You're gonna come and talk with us over here, okay? All right, my dear, here. Put your right against there.
An 18-year-old Illinois woman named Ellie Masukevich went viral in December 2022 following her dramatic behavior during an encounter with law enforcement. The incident began shortly after 7 p.m. in Crystal Lake when deputies confronted Masukevich as she sat in her vehicle in a parking lot. They had received complaints from concerned civilians who had seen Masukevich's SUV swerving all over the road and tailgating other cars. In police body cam footage, a female officer could be heard telling Masukevich that she was going to search the vehicle. Masukevich told the cop that she needed a warrant, apparently unaware that the search was justified based on probable cause. The back and forth continued for several minutes, and when Masukevich realized she wasn't going to stop the search from happening, her behavior devolved into a tantrum. She resisted as multiple officers handcuffed her, then screamed repeatedly for the police to remove the handcuffs. Masukevich remained uncooperative and combative as the officers worked together to place her in the back seat of one of their vehicles. She continued to wail and scream.
You can't! And then we'll bring her out. He's gonna grab the wrap.
Without
My assumption.
consent!
Yeah, exactly what he's doing. We'll set her up and then we can just lift her.
Stop touching me!
During the drive down to booking and broke down crying when she realized she wasn't going to go home that evening. Records show that Masukevich pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor count of resisting an officer. Over a dozen other charges were dropped and she was given a 2-year conditional discharge, which will give her the opportunity to avoid a criminal conviction as long as she complies with the court's rules and requirements while under supervision. Number 16. Jonathan Sander. A heated dispute between neighbors in Wake Forest, North Carolina, came to a gruesome end in March of 2016 when 52-year-old Jonathan Frederick Sander fatally shot 47-year-old Sandy Mazzella, his wife, 43-year-old Stephanie Ann, and his mother, 76-year-old Elaine Mazzella. Just months earlier, Jonathan and Sandy had been good friends who worked together in the landscaping business, but their friendship had soured due to money and business-related disagreements, and Jonathan had been arrested a month prior to the triple murder for threatening Sandy. During the previous incident, Jonathan had warned Sandy that the police couldn't protect him. The feud reached its breaking point when the Mazzellas accused Jonathan of harming a child. On the night of the killings, neighbors overheard loud arguing and called law enforcement, but nothing came of it until later that evening, when a second 911 caller reported hearing multiple gunshots and people screaming. Jonathan had barged into the Mazzellas' home with a shotgun and opened fire on the family at close range. The day before the murders, the Mazzellas had gone to court and tried persuading a judge to issue long-term orders of protection against Sander. They claimed they feared for their lives after previously being threatened at gunpoint by their neighbor, but the judge denied their request. During police questioning, Sander said that he had snapped and just went blank. During his trial, he repeatedly lashed out at prosecutors. He also became disruptive when Sal Mazzella was testifying, and at one point he had to be removed from the courtroom due to his behavior. The judge warned Sander that he wasn't doing any favors for his case by acting that way, but he continued to lack self-control right until the very end of the court proceedings. After being found guilty of all 3 murders and given a life sentence in lieu of the death penalty, Sander's courtroom outbursts continued. Meanwhile, the judge informed him that if he had eaten the consequences for his lower-level charges and stopped himself from murdering anyone, he would have faced no more than 29 months in prison. Sander proceeded to interrupt the Mazzellas during their victim impact statements, then delivered a rambling 30-minute diatribe, claiming that he had been framed and blaming others for his fate. The judge eventually got fed up with his antics and ended the hearing, stating, "When you take your last breath, you're going to die alone and you're going to die forgotten. Get him out of my courtroom." Number 15. Ryan O'Neill Woodruff. Roger Woodruff and Deborah Goins were found bludgeoned to death inside their Georgetown County, South Carolina home on a Saturday night in May of 2021. A few days earlier, suspicion fell on 29-year-old Ryan O'Neill Woodruff, a relative who was living with the couple at the time of their murder. By the time authorities charged Woodruff with the murders of Roger and Deborah, he was already in custody on an unrelated attempted murder charge. He was nevertheless granted bond, and his criminal cases were ongoing when he was arrested for a 3rd murder in January 2023. Woodruff is now facing an additional murder charge for the death of 19-year-old Tyquez Walker, who was gunned down in the kitchen of a local residence in the middle of the night. Many were left to wonder why Woodruff had been granted bail after the double homicide. He remained in custody following his arrest for Walker's murder and was sentenced to 2 life terms without parole for the first 2 murders. Records show that the more recent murder case is ongoing, but regardless of the outcome, Walker will remain behind bars until his dying day. Number 14. Manson Bryant. In March of 2019, 32-year-old Manson Bryant of Painesville, Ohio, arrived in court for sentencing for 7 felonies, including aggravated burglary, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, and abduction charges stemming from a home invasion in July of 2018. At first, he was extremely polite and respectful, telling the judge that he had made a lifetime of bad decisions and that he was sorry for his actions. But his demeanor changed dramatically after Lake County Common Pleas Court Judge Eugene Lucci imposed a 22-year prison sentence. Courtroom footage showed Bryant giving his defense attorney a confused look before he began mouthing off at the judge. The sentence was substantially longer than that of his co-defendant, who was sentenced to 12 years in prison and was supposedly the main actor in the crime. Bryant accused Lucci of being racist and repeatedly said, "courtroom," prompting the judge to reconsider his sentence.
22 years and
Lucci tacked on another 6 years to Bryant's term, bringing his sentence to a 28-year maximum. As he permitted bailiffs to remove Bryant from the courtroom, Lucci commented on how the defendant had shown a complete lack of remorse. This wasn't the defendant's first time lashing out at the judge, however. After pleading guilty to receiving stolen property back in 2014, Bryant made a highly inappropriate comment at Lucci, and he lengthened his sentence by a year for it. After having his more recent sentence increased to 28 years, Bryant fought the decision. In June of 2022, the Ohio Supreme Court ruled that the lower court could not extend his sentence based on his outburst. In its opinion, the court wrote that Bryant's in-the-moment reaction to his sentence had no logical bearing on whether he had remorse. His sentence was reduced back down to 22 years, and records list a projected release date of March 2042. Number 13. Michael Thompson. In October 2023, Michael Lawrence Thompson of Seminole County, Florida, made the regrettable mistake of driving while intoxicated with a child in the vehicle. He rear-ended a motorcycle after failing to realize that it had stopped and was waiting to turn. The motorcycle's driver, 65-year-old Richard Mills, and his passenger, 61-year-old Joanne Torley, were knocked off the bike due to the impact of the crash. A Good Samaritan pulled over to assist at the scene, and an 81-year-old motorist struck the motorcycle, Thompson's SUV, and the Good Samaritan's car with his pickup truck after failing to notice the wreck in time to avoid a collision. Mills and Torley died at the scene, while all the other parties suffered minor injuries at worst. Thompson displayed noticeable signs of intoxication at the scene, including watery and glassy eyes, and he smelled of alcohol. He was charged with 2 counts of DUI manslaughter and was released from jail about a week later after posting a $51,000 bond. As a condition of his freedom, Thompson was required to be fitted with an alcohol monitoring device within 42 hours of his release, and he was also ordered to abstain from alcohol use. He failed to do both of these things and was seen buying beer on 2 separate occasions, resulting in the judge's decision to revoke his bond. Thompson's case is ongoing and he remains held without bail at the Seminole County Jail. Number 12. Emile Weaver. During the fall of 2014, rumors about a pregnant sorority sister began circulating on campus at Muskingum University in New Concord, Ohio. Students had noticed that 20-year-old Emile Weaver was gaining weight, despite her attempts to hide her growing figure with baggy clothes. She denied being pregnant, but she gave birth in a sorority house bathroom one night in April 2015. 2 of her sorority sisters found the child's lifeless body in a garbage bag outside, and Weaver was charged with murder. She initially denied being the baby's mother, but she admitted to being the mother after realizing that the police would inevitably link her to the newborn through DNA. Weaver then claimed that she hadn't taken a pregnancy test and didn't know she was pregnant, but records show that she had taken a test at the university's health center. Staff members at the center had tried to notify Weaver of the positive test results and were unable to reach her, but a search of the young woman's cell phone revealed that she knew she was pregnant and had told the baby's father. Based on their conversations, it seemed clear that neither Weaver nor the child's father wanted the baby, but it was too late to terminate the pregnancy by the time they had this discussion. Weaver showed a noticeable lack of emotion during questioning, even as she discussed how the child was born alive but didn't survive. At one point, she readily admitted that she was more worried about her own well-being than the baby's. Based on the autopsy results, prosecutors argued that the death was not accidental and that Weaver's daughter might have survived if given proper care. Weaver was charged with murder and detained on a $1 million bond. She turned down a 15-year plea deal and pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, hoping for a better outcome than what the prosecution had offered. While awaiting trial, Weaver spoke frequently with her mother over the phone, but the conversations didn't paint her in a favorable light. In addition to seeming emotionally detached from the situation, Weaver and her mother discussed things like what the defendant would wear to maximize her innocent look. In 2016, a jury found Weaver guilty of aggravated murder, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence, and she was sentenced to life in prison. She was sentenced to life in prison but appealed her case, arguing that her punishment was excessive compared to similar cases, and in 2022 she was resentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Weaver is currently halfway through her minimum term and will become eligible for parole in 2035. Number 11. Jesusadelaida Lopez. In June of 2018, a 39-year-old Florida woman named Jesusadelaida Jessie Lopez was arrested for posing as a medical professional at the Drop It Like It's Hot weight loss clinic she owned in Winter Haven. She was charged with 6 counts of unlicensed practice of healthcare for portraying herself as a registered nurse. Despite holding no medical degrees, Lopez was accused of unlawfully prescribing medication and performing certain procedures, including vampire facelifts. Authorities also charged her employee, Dr. S. Kamal Ashraf, with knowingly employing an unlicensed person in the practice of nursing. In February 2019, Lopez was arrested for the same exact crime that she had been nabbed for 8 months earlier. According to law enforcement, she was caught pretending to be a nurse at Jessie's gym In Auburndale, during a press conference announcing the woman's arrest, Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd revealed that Lopez was using the same exact drop-it-like-it's-hot marketing scheme that she had been utilizing at her weight loss clinic the first time she was busted. Her second arrest came after the state health department began receiving complaints about her practicing medicine without a license. An undercover investigator with the agency came in for a consultation, and Lopez offered her prescription weight loss shots. A Polk County detective also paid a visit to the business and was offered weight loss supplements that Lopez was not qualified to prescribe. A few days later, the accused repeat offender received an unexpected guest, her probation officer, who told her not to contact anyone during his visit. Lopez ignored the instruction and used her smartwatch to warn a co-worker to get rid of incriminating evidence. One of the gym's owners began removing items from the building and placing them in his truck, but he was caught by law enforcement and was charged with tampering with evidence. Lopez was hit with additional charges for practicing medicine without a license, and at some point she became worried that her estranged husband, Daniel Lopez, might be a key witness in the case who would help put her behind bars. While in custody at the Polk County Jail, she befriended a man and revealed that she wanted Daniel killed. In a handwritten note to her new friend, Lopez wrote that she wanted Daniel's death to look like an accident or a robbery gone wrong. Unbeknownst to Lopez, the man was an undercover cop, and she was soon hit with an additional charge of solicitation to commit murder. She pleaded no contest and was sentenced to 10 years in prison, with her projected release date listed as March of 2029. Number 10. Kallen Wood. 28-year-old Kallen Wood was in a Dayton, Ohio courtroom for a misdemeanor domestic violence and assault case in April of 2019 when she attacked her public defender with handcuffs on. The case was supposed to go to trial that day, but Wood wanted a new lawyer. The judge granted her request and the trial was adjourned until a later date. As Wood left the courtroom, she suddenly struck her public defender in the head. She also threatened to kill the magistrate, but a bailiff immediately wrapped her in a bear hug, preventing anyone else from being harmed. As a result of the attack, Wood was charged with a host of felonies, including 2 counts of intimidation and 2 counts of retaliation, along with an additional misdemeanor assault charge. According to court documents, Wood was struggling to comply with a mental health-based agency that was trying to help her navigate the justice system. Her mental and emotional well-being continued to suffer while she was being detained on her new charges. About a month after the courtroom outburst, Wood was accused of spitting and throwing urine at staff and inmates. She was charged with 4 counts of harassment by an inmate and 2 counts of assault. Records show that Wood was convicted of retaliation, intimidation, harassment by an inmate, and assault, and was sentenced to 5 years of probation. Trouble found her again in June of 2024 when she was charged with assaulting hospital staff. In a separate incident that occurred the following month, Wood was charged with harassment by bodily substance. She was convicted of both charges and was once again sentenced to 5 years of probation. Under the terms of her supervision, she's required to undergo mental health treatment and attend a vocational and employment program. Number 9. Michael Ray. During the fall of 2012, 32-year-old Michael Ray was arrested in Louisville, Kentucky, for threatening, frisking, and robbing a woman while posing as a police officer. The victim later told CBS News that Ray accused her of having drugs and searched her and her vehicle. He was carrying a badge and a gun and was accompanied by a woman. Ray and the female suspect told the victim to choose between going to jail or allowing one of them to drive her car back to her house while the other suspect followed in their supposed police vehicle. Not wanting to go to jail, the victim chose the latter option. The suspects made the woman ride in their vehicle during the short but nerve-wracking drive to her house. Upon arriving at the residence, the woman told the suspects that her husband and kids were inside. As they turned to leave, Ray pointed a gun at the victim and warned her never to return to the liquor store where they had first crossed paths. Unbeknownst to Ray, the victim had seen his name on his driver's license. She passed the information on to law enforcement, and Ray was arrested just hours later on suspicion of robbery, unlawful imprisonment, and impersonating a police officer. But instead of turning over a new leaf, Ray continued with his criminal lifestyle. In November 2016, he was charged with a handful of crimes, including terroristic threatening and second-degree assault. The judge set his bond at $25,000, causing him to scoff incredulously after hearing the amount. When the judge asked Ray if he thought the situation was funny, he responded, "I think it's hilarious," and began to walk away. The judge then doubled his bond to $50,000, prompting Ray to return to the courtroom. He yelled that he hoped he saw the judge on the streets, gave her the middle finger twice, and threatened her. Ray continued acting aggressively, even after the judge sentenced him to 100 days in jail for contempt. When that failed to quiet him down, the judge charged him with terroristic threatening. While the outcome of Ray's case is unclear, records show that he passed away in 2020 at the age of 40 years old. Number 8. Cornel Oliver. In 2015, 30-year-old Cornel Oliver and 2 co-defendants pleaded guilty to federal weapons charges stemming from their involvement in a home intrusion that left 1 victim dead. All 3 men were sentenced to 25 years in prison, but their sentences were vacated due to a change in federal law. Determined not to let the man walk free, prosecutors filed first-degree murder charges against the suspects in October 2021. 2 months later, Oliver posted bail and was freed on an ankle monitor while awaiting trial. In January 2022, just weeks after his release from jail, Oliver was arrested in Montgomery County, Tennessee, for assaulting the mother of his children. According to reports, he hit the woman during an argument, then chased her down and choked her. He was nevertheless allowed to post bail and was soon back out on the street. The murder case was still ongoing nearly a year later, in December 2022, when Oliver assaulted his ex-girlfriend at her Clarksville home and led police on a pursuit. Deputies spotted Oliver driving away from the scene as they responded to a reported home break-in at the woman's residence, where Oliver had allegedly forced his way inside and attacked his ex. Members of law enforcement chased after Oliver until he lost control of his vehicle and crashed. He ran off into a nearby forest but was still wearing an ankle monitor, making it easy for law enforcement to track him down. Oliver surrendered without further incident and was charged with aggravated assault, especially aggravated burglary, evading arrest, possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony, and false imprisonment. The current status of his case is unclear. Number 7. Eshawn Langston.
Eshawn, step out.
For what?
Step out.
No, for what?
No, Eshawn, step out.
No, for what?
You're under arrest for a bond violation.
For a
Step-
bond violation?
Yes.
I haven't been nowhere, but right here at my
Eshawn,
hand.
Eshawn, exit
What
the
do
car.
you mean?
Eshawn, get out of the car. Eshawn, get out of the car.
Hell no.
Eshawn, get out of the car.
Hell no.
Late one night in December 2024, police in Bay City, Michigan, descended on the home of 23-year-old Eshawn Langston, who was wanted for violating his bond in an ongoing criminal case. Upon being confronted by officers, Langston remained seated in his car with his young child on his lap, while refusing orders to exit the vehicle. An officer smashed one of the car's windows right before Langston crashed into a police vehicle, at which point the cops deployed tasers in order to take him into custody. As he was being placed under arrest, Langston pulled a knife and stabbed 2 officers. Both officers survived with injuries, and Langston was charged with 2 counts of assault causing injury, 2 counts of assault with a dangerous weapon, and 1 count of child abuse. He was released on bond despite the severity of his alleged crimes, leaving several officials and community members feeling angered by the judge's decision to lower his bond amount from $25,000 to a personal recognizance bond. Immediately upon his release, however, Langston was taken into custody in Saginaw County, where he was accused of violating his probation in another case involving an assault on law enforcement. He remains in custody at the Saginaw County Jail amid his ongoing cases. Number 6. Rebecca Lynn O'Donnell. Former Arkansas State Senator Linda Collins Smith was found stabbed to death outside her Pocahontas, Arkansas home in June of 2019. Her decomposing body was wrapped in a comforter and a tarp, and it was clear that she had been dead for several days. Nearly 2 weeks later, authorities charged the 57-year-old's close friend and former campaign worker, 49-year-old Rebecca Lynn O'Donnell, with capital murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. According to people who knew the women, O'Donnell frequently borrowed money from Collins Smith, who had started to suspect her friend of stealing from her. When Collins Smith confronted O'Donnell with her suspicions, O'Donnell snapped and killed her. During her time in pre-trial detention, O'Donnell tried hiring someone to kill Colin Smith's ex-husband, Phil Smith, and his new wife, Mary. She also reportedly sought to have someone kill the prosecutor in her case, Henry Boyce, and the judge, Harold Irwin. 2 inmates came forward to detectives, and their claims were deemed credible. In addition to the charges she was already facing, O'Donnell was charged with 2 felony counts of solicitation to commit capital murder and 2 misdemeanor counts of solicitation to commit tampering with physical evidence while in custody. She eventually confessed to killing Colin Smith, and in 2020, she pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. O'Donnell also pleaded no contest to 2 counts of solicitation to commit capital murder and received prison sentences totaling 50 years, including 43 years for the first-degree murder charge and 7 years for the murder for hire charge. Number 5. Ebony Romanick.
Record me! He's racist!
In January 2024, a 27-year-old Florida woman named Ebony Romanick dialed 911 7 times from her Palm Coast home and berated the dispatchers while claiming that she was dealing with a life or death emergency. She accused her ex-boyfriend of stealing her 2 dogs, and Flagler County deputies were dispatched to the scene, where they were met with instant hostility from the caller. Romanick shouted and threw rocks at the cops, who fought to subdue her while she resisted and screamed at the top of her lungs. The drama continued in the back of a police cruiser as Romanick accused the officers of being racist and kept her voice at maximum volume. She was charged with misuse of 911, resisting an officer without violence, and 3 counts of assault on a law enforcement officer. Records show that she successfully completed a diversion program, enabling her to avoid any criminal convictions in the case. Number 4. Deon Lathel Gibson. Deon Lathel Gibson was driving along Interstate 26 in Charleston, South Carolina in 2020 when he struck a motorcycle, killing Lance Davis and Brittany Reeves. He fled the scene, but was captured a few days later and booked into custody on charges of reckless homicide and leaving the scene of an accident with death. Gibson was granted bond, only to be arrested again in February 2022. This time, he was charged with drug-related offenses, and he soon walked free after being granted bond, leaving the victims' families hopelessly frustrated as they spent months waiting for a bond revocation hearing. Gibson's bond was revoked in July of that year, but he spent just 60 days in jail, much to the frustration of Davis and Reeves's loved ones. Gibson was still free in late 2023 when he was arrested again, following what began as a routine traffic stop. After noticing the smell of marijuana, officers decided to search his vehicle, at which point he began to resist. He elbowed an officer in the head and shoved another before the cops managed to subdue him. Inside the car, police found 460 grams of methamphetamine and a handgun. Gibson was arrested on suspicion of assault and battery, drug trafficking, possession of a weapon during a violent crime, resisting arrest, and possession of a firearm by a convicted violent felon. The homicide case appears to be ongoing, but he's finally being kept behind bars in the meantime. Number 3. Entitled driver feels above the law.
I ask you what you're looking for that I see you over there. Are you looking for something specific? I don't know. I'm just asking you what you're looking for. You couldn't be reaching for something else. Are you trying to find your ID, your registration, your insurance? This is what you're trying to do? This is where you're coming from.
That way. That's where.
In April 2023, police in Sarasota, Florida spotted a truck driving on its front rims with the tires missing. An officer pulled the vehicle over and received immediate attention from the woman behind the wheel, who reportedly works as a teacher and was on her way home after having some drinks at her boss's house. When questioned about her missing tires, she repeatedly insisted that nothing was wrong with her tires.
No,
Alright.
nothing wrong with the tires.
Alright.
I'm gonna come out.
No, you cannot come out yet. I'm asking you real quick. Do you know what happened with your tires?
There's nothing wrong with those tires.
You were parked somewhere?
She refused an officer's command to exit the vehicle for a field sobriety test, prompting several cops to forcibly remove her from the truck. The woman began screaming her head off and proceeded to have a full-on meltdown as she resisted officers.
Oh, record it. Record it. These mother are recording me for no reason. Let go of me, you piece of shit.
You remember what the
Let
time
go of me, you piece of shit.
who were eventually able to place her in the back of a law enforcement vehicle. She was charged with driving under the influence, battery, resisting an officer with violence, and driving with an expired license. Number 2. Oudy Weber. In October 2022, 27-year-old Oudy Isaac Weber was accused of trying to hire a fellow inmate at the Brown County, Wisconsin jail to kill his girlfriend. He was detained on a stalking charge involving the woman when he decided he wanted her dead. The inmate, Weber, had tried to hire told investigators that Weber had offered him $25,000 to beat the intended victim to death. Officers provided the witness with a recording device, and he used it to capture his conversations with Weber about the murder-for-hire plot. Oudy provided the fellow inmate with specific details about where and when to find his girlfriend and how he wanted her killed. He also began taking steps to get the $25,000 payment to the hired assassin, but he soon learned that his plot had been foiled by the man he had entrusted to ensure that it was a success. In October 2022, Weber pleaded no contest to solicitation of first-degree intentional homicide, stalking, and violating a restraining order. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison and is scheduled to be released in September 2026. Number 1. Chuck Zito. 71-year-old Chuck Zito is an actor, a former Hells Angel, and a longtime friend of President Donald Trump. He was driving his 1968 Chevelle SS along the Throgs Neck Expressway in New York in November 2024 when police pulled him over for having a bogus license plate. The traffic stop came as part of a ghost plate operation, which led to the determination that the Florida dealer plate on Zito's car was fake. Zito was arrested, and he wasted no time complaining about it on Instagram after his release from custody. 10 hours later, he described his arrest as outrageous and used foul language to describe a female cop at the scene who he speculated was a Kamala Harris supporter. The septuagenarian went on to complain about how he asked an officer to loosen his handcuffs, only to be told, "Oh, sorry, I left the pink fuzzy cuffs at home." Zito told the New York Post that he had shown the police paperwork proving that his license plates were legitimate. Despite his dissatisfaction with how the situation played out, he insisted that he is pro-law enforcement and will continue to faithfully back the blue. Thanks for watching. If you were 10 years into serving a 15-year sentence and you got the perfect opportunity to escape from prison, would you do it or not, and why? Let us know in the comments section below.